welcome to the Governor's Council hearing this morning. My name is Eileen Duff, and I am chairing the hearing, and I call this meeting. I'll first read the governor. I am pleased to nominate Mr. Mark DeFrancisco for appointment as a member of the Appellate Tax Board to a term expiring February 28th, 2026. I submit this nomination and designation for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 58A, Section 1. I appreciate your consideration of the nominee. A resume is attached for your convenience. Can you hear me, councilors?
Yes, I can.
Thank
You're
you.
doing a great job.
So on that note, I will ask the nominee to introduce his witness this morning.
Yes, good morning. Mark DeFrancisco, and I'm pleased to introduce my boss, the chairman of the Appellate Tax Board, Thomas W.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Would you like to give a statement, please, in favor of the witness?
Sure. I have to apologize. I've been failed by technology again. My iPad wouldn't recognize the website, and my VPN with the state laptop also crashed. So I'm presenting by telephone, and I hope that's okay.
Perfectly fine.
I'm honored to speak on Mark's behalf in support of his confirmation as commissioner. I've known Mark for well over 20 years, and most recently the last 14 years as the chief counsel to the Appellate Tax Board. I was advised that Mark would be an excellent candidate for chief counsel, and I appointed him shortly after I took over in 2006. It's probably the best decision I've ever made in state government. He's been my go-to person at the board, not only for his thoughtful legal analysis, but also his advice and counsel on procedural and technical matters. Mark has probably authored hundreds of successful legal decisions and opinions, and it's a testament to his expertise and that the board has been affirmed by the Mass Appeals Court and the SJC on average over 90% of the cases that go up the appellate ladder. Mark and I have worked closely on procedural motions. We have motion sessions every other week, and we decide literally hundreds of procedural motions and summary judgment motions. And his knowledge and counsel on those have been invaluable to me. I've also recommended Mark, and he's subsequently been retained by Boston University Law School to teach federal practice and procedure over the last 6 years. So not only is he intimately familiar with the Mass procedural rules, but he's familiar with the U.S. tax court rules as well as federal practice and procedure with the Internal Revenue Service. And he brings that knowledge to the table on some of the issues that overlap with state government. In addition to his excellent legal and analytical skills and writing skills, he really has the temperament and demeanor to conduct fair and equitable hearings. He has served as a key mediator in our recently established mediation program, and he's been praised by both parties through mediations for his expertise, his demeanor, and his ability to get people to be reasonable and settle cases, which I think is an invaluable asset to be a commissioner at the Appellate Tax Board. And I have to say that I've worked closely with Mark for over 14 years and have developed not only a great working relationship as a colleague and counsel, but as a tremendous friend as well. He's a dedicated husband and father. He's active in the local parish church, and he's just probably one of the best attorneys I've ever encountered. And I think he'd be a tremendous asset to the board. So I hope that the council will consider him favorably, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Questions, councilors?
I have one, Madam.
Thank you, Councilor Jubenville.
I thank you for that endorsement. Our former executive director, George Cronin, once told me I should always listen to Tom Hammond when he speaks. And I intend on doing that. Thank you very much, and thanks for the call and the letter you gave. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jubenville.
Thank you. Councilor Devaney, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Tom, it's a pleasure to have you speak. I'm disappointed we had talked last week when you called me, and I thought you were going to be in person. I had the honor of presiding over your hearing, and I voted for you a number of times. I'll tell you, this is the greatest recommendation that this nominee could get, having your recommendation. We have your letter, and you said it well, so it would be repetitious. I did want to ask you, in the 14 years that you have worked with Mark, and you appointed Mark, what case is significant to you that comes to mind that was so important?
Well, the big part to you. I mean, we've had a Department of Revenue cases that are precedent-setting. We also had a telephone taxability of poles and wires over public ways cases that resulted in substantial revenues for the cities and towns that weren't previously taxed. And just in general, we've spent a lot of time issuing very technical decisions on taxation of telecommunications and also internet sales, and the very technical aspect of taxing business now that the Department of Revenue struggles with over the internet. And Mark's counsel on those technical issues, he's a lot more savvy on the computer world than I am, so I have to rely on his expertise to deal with that. So I would say the telephone cases, but then also a number of corporate cases that have gone up to the Supreme Court dealing with how the state taxes out-of-state corporations. Those have been the most significant.
Well, if you could give me one word as an attribute for Mark and what he will bring to the board, what would you say?
Integrity.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I have to say that I couldn't be more pleased that you are the chair, that you're still there, and you're still reappointed. Because unfortunately, I can't choose to reappoint people that are outstanding. When someone is removed, I have no ability to bring that person back. So I am so glad that you have been reappointed. And, and the thing that I see with you serving with Mark, that there's such an adhesive with all of the board. Everyone respects each other. I have voted a number of times with everyone. In fact, I'm sad to see Attorney Rose go, and what a great guy. So, what would you say has changed since you have been on, and what change has Mark made to make the appellate board more efficient and more accountable?
Well, I would say when I started at the board, we probably had between 25 and 28,000 cases, a lot of which had languished because there wasn't a chairman for over a year and a half. So Mark and I sat down and came up with summary judgment procedures, expediting small claims cases, issuing essentially like Rule 128 decisions that the Mass Appeals Court uses, kind of a short form decision, so that we can get the opinions out quick on non-precedential cases. So by attacking the inventory that way and by encouraging mediation and settlement, we've been able to knock that inventory down to about 4,500 cases now from the 28,000 or so that I inherited when I came in the door. And a lot of those have just been recently filed. We've obviously got a little bit of a backlog just in terms of not being able to schedule cases because of the COVID situation, but I'm hopefully that will be rectified in the near future if we ever get past that COVID thing. But obviously it's been a huge impediment for us keeping that efficiency level at the level that we'd like to have it.
Thank you. That's amazing. That's quite a record. But I do want to say again, I am so disappointed that you're not sitting in front of me here, and it's about 12 feet apart, and you talked on the phone that you're going to be here. Sorry, you were not allowed to come. I'm all alone up here in the council, but I would have loved to see you in front of me. But thank you. Your testimony, believe me, it means so much, and thank you for taking the time.
No, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilor Iannella?
Yes, I don't have any questions, but I appreciate your testimony on behalf of Mark, and it means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Councilor.
Attorney DeFrancisco, would you like to make your statement?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairperson Duff, and thank you, councilors, for taking the time to hear me this morning. First, like to thank the governor and the lieutenant governor for nominating me to this position. I'm honored, and I hope that in this brief statement I can put a little bit of flesh on the bones of the resume to let you know a little bit about who I am and what I hope to be if you were to give the governor advice on this nomination. First and foremost, I am the husband of Mary. We've been married for 40 years. We celebrated our 40th anniversary this past June. We were blessed with 3 children, our daughter Jessie and our sons Marty and Justin. We also have 3 beautiful grandchildren who we haven't hugged since March, and we're sad about that. Anthony, Raphael, and Mario. So that's a big part of who I am. In terms of my legal abilities and where I come from, and what my work ethic is, I'm the youngest of 3 sons of Mario and Lisa DeFrancisco, who were first-generation Italian Americans. Their parents all immigrated from Italy and settled in the Albany area where I was born and raised. They worked hard to provide for us. My mother worked and my father worked, and I still have memories of my father working evenings and Saturdays to give us a comfortable life. They never had the opportunity to go to college, but they felt strongly that their son should go. So they didn't have the money to send us, but my brothers took the route of the military. My oldest brother went to West Point. My middle brother got an ROTC scholarship to Siena College just outside of Albany, and they both had very successful careers. I was substantially younger than my brothers, and it was kind of the post-Vietnam era, and maybe it was a little bit of that and a little bit of youthful rebellion, but I did not want to go the military route, so I took out loans. I worked summers, 2 jobs. I worked part-time during college to put myself through, and Mary was probably the happiest day of our marriage when we made that last loan payment to move on. I wound up going to Holy Cross, moving from Albany out to Worcester. Had a wonderful time there, and in thinking back, and this is a very interesting exercise to look back to, as the poet would say, see how everything leads up to this day. I think back to that time at Holy Cross, and specifically to one professor I had, Bob Cording, in the English department. I was an English major, and he taught poetry. And as odd as that sounds, I think it turned out to really be an important part of my legal career because he really taught about how the poet would use words, very selective words, would struggle for months to get the wording just right to convey not only a literal meaning, but to point to a meaning that was much more sublime and much more profound. And he taught us to both read very carefully, but almost more importantly, to be able to articulate what the poet was trying to say in very organized fashion and using our words economically and specifically to kind of take the evidence that the poet had laid out in his poems and to write a persuasive argument that would defend what our position was in terms of what that poem meant. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was an outstanding foundation for my legal career. I was so impressed, I wanted to be an eccentric English professor at some college, but I met Mary at Holy Cross, and she was a year ahead of me in this process. She was going to law school and said, why don't you go to law school? And we can both work for my father in a small firm up in Lawrence. So I had already learned to do what Mary says. So I did go to law school. I went to work at her firm, at her father's firm, and it was an interesting experience. I got involved in court-appointed criminal defense work. I got on the bar advocate lists at a couple of the local district courts, and I was just having a blast trying cases. And, I learned to use some of those things that Professor Cording had said, but now it was people's lives where you would take really the best of what you had to offer, both in terms of the facts of the case and his or her personal life. And sometimes that was harder than others, defending some of the folks I did, but then present them either in plea discussions with the DA or before a judge to basically present a persuasive argument on behalf of the client. So I had a wonderful time, very energized. However, after a couple of years, it became clear we had two small children, and it was time that one of us got a job with normal hours. And so I found out about an opening at the Appellate Tax Board, went to work there, was fortunate enough to be offered a job. And I have to admit, when I got there, it was fairly soul crushing to come from this, exciting litigating life to working with a bunch of old lawyers who had been doing state and local tax for decades. And I thought, what have I gotten myself into? But those old lawyers turned out to be really good guys. They mentored me in the state and local practice. The chairman at the time suggested that I get an LLM degree from BU. And for those that might not know, that's sort of a specialized degree in tax that for lawyers. So I did get that degree. So I had a fairly substantial background in tax. One of my findings that I drafted at the board caught the eye of one of the practitioners that came before the board. He wound up offering me a job to come to his firm, which I accepted. So I did Appellate Tax Board litigation, both on behalf of municipalities and on behalf of taxpayers. I also represented taxpayers in Department of Revenue matters. But maybe more importantly, my experience broadened to general civil litigation. I did some will contests and divorces in probate court. I did commercial litigation in district and superior court. And one thing that I was very fortunate to get involved in is working for veterans. I got admitted to something called the U.S. Court of Veterans Appeals, where I represented veterans and their spouses in attempting to get pensions and disability relief on account of injuries sustained in service. And I had always felt bad coming from a military family that I hadn't gone into the service, and I felt that was in some small way paying back, and I was honored to do that. So I got a fair amount of experience in discovery, in pre-trial motion practice, and trial work while I was at the firm. I was there for 4 years. I saw the handwriting on the wall that the firm was starting to become unstable. Some of the folks were leaving. So it happened that there was an opportunity at the Appellate Tax Board to come back. I was a known commodity. I was hired. The chairman that hired me wound up naming me chief counsel after a year or two. And I have been selected as chief counsel for 3 subsequent chairmen. And just so you know, that's not an inherited post. Every chairman has the discretion and the prerogative to choose their chief. And I've been honored to be chosen by 4 of the chairmen of the board. And I can tell you now, I have the honor of serving with Tom. And thank you, Tom, for your kind remarks. But, you know, most of what we're saying about where we are at the board is as a result of your leadership. And really, Tom has stressed the kind of the speeding up of our whole process to narrow issues for trial, to get discovery disputes resolved. And it's been an honor to serve with him. And under his leadership, I think the council should know that the board is really a professional place to work. Everyone there is committed to serving the public, and that means taxpayers and assessors and the Department of Revenue. Everyone that comes before us with dignity, with respect, and with a level playing field where no one has favorable treatment. And I do want to acknowledge one person at the board, the great success story, and Tom is responsible for elevating him. He's done a lot of elevating folks from within the board. Bill Doherty is our clerk, and there's no one that works harder than Bill to accessible to the public, to answer their questions. And he started out as a stenographer with us, and Tom saw in him talent and brought him up. And just it's a great success story. And all of the folks at the board, the members, the top-notch legal team, everyone is committed to serving the public and doing it right. So what I think I can bring to the board, if you were to give your advice and consent on the governor's nomination, is, first of all, I'm a known commodity. I think I have the respect for practitioners in the area. As you can see from the resume, I've been asked to speak to assessors, to taxpayer groups, to any number of groups. I think I'm recognized as someone that knows the business well and that is open and accessible. I think I know the pretrial aspect of our practice, which is very important to kind of narrow issues, to resolve discovery disputes and tee things up for the proper hearing. And I'm nobody's favorite. I don't come from any particular place. I don't come from the Department of Revenue or from the assessors. I have represented all of those parties other than the Department of Revenue. So I think I bring an openness, a fairness, and it would be an honor if you were to grant me your advice and consent to take this position. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the councilors may have.
Thank you, Attorney. Council Hurley.
Good morning. Mr. DeFrancisco, I don't really have any questions. I was very impressed with your resume.
Thank you.
We spoke and you basically cleared up a lot of issues for me. I think you're well balanced, and certainly your background and experience will serve the board well. With that said, I really don't have any questions. I just wish you the best of luck, and I'll be voting for you next week. Thank you.
Thank you very
Council
much.
Ianella.
I don't have any questions either. It's a great appointment, and I know your counselor is very supportive of you. And when your name comes before the council next week, I'll be more than happy to support you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Jubenville.
So, Mark, you were a poetry major at Holy Cross?
Yes, I was.
Well, I'm going to test you out. There's a very famous poem in Massachusetts, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. Who's
Yes.
the author?
Wow, that's an easy one, Counselor. Robert Frost. He's
right.
one of my favorites and one of Professor Cording's favorites as well.
you also are very wise to give your boss a nice compliment at the end, so that says a lot about you. And I read your resume and your background, and if you're not qualified for this job, then I don't know who the heck is. But Tom Hammond obviously has a lot of weight with me. I'm very pleased that you've been nominated. Thank you very much for.
Thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you. Councilor Fiera, do you have any questions?
I spoke to the nominee the other day. I received Mr. Hammond's letter, which I was pleased to get. And I had a long discussion with the nominee as well. I think he is the best person in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to fill the job. And he certainly has my support next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fiera. I have to say, that many of us know that much about. It's a very specialized part of the law. So you're absolutely right. Councilor Devaney.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations, Mac. Yes, I know it's questions. I've been here 21 years. Thank you. I just have to say, to preface it, you know, they say one is the loneliest number, and it certainly is, because we have 5 councilors on the Councilor Juvenville and Councilor Arnella and Councilor Duff and Hurley and Ferrara, and I'm all alone here, and it's very strange. And when I talked with you, Mark, last week, 4 hours, and we talked about, and you're looking forward to coming. And so Tom had called me, and he was excited about coming and being a witness in the State House. So I'll tell you, it's eerie. I'm looking at 2 empty chairs that are 12, 14 feet away from me, that the nominee and the witness would be, and then I've got 6 empty chairs and I'm alone. So here I am. So anyway, I just want to say that, you know, 36 years, Mark, that is a remarkable, you know, record. Besides before what you brought to the board. Yeah. Now, you know, when, you know, this is just what I always look for. I look for promoting from within. And I have said it time and again, if you work for Dunkin' Donuts and the manager left and you're the assistant and you've done a good job, you should get it. Don't appoint someone from outside, you know, and unfortunately that does happen. I got to ask you, why is it that when we had people on the Appellate Tax Board that retired, that you've been to 36 years, you never thought about being a member?
Well, I have thought about it. I felt I could be more effective and more of a help to the board as counsel. I also never wanted to challenge an incumbent. And by the way, someone mentioned Commissioner Rose. I hope the council knows that Commissioner Rose retired. I'm not. I didn't seek to take his spot by any involuntary means. But basically, most of the openings that have come up have been situations where a sitting commissioner was being replaced. And I never, being a colleague, I never thought it was appropriate to put my hat in the ring. This time I did because Jim retired, so that's why I'm here this morning.
I agree with you, and I'm sorry for the past that we've lost good people. And I do want to say that Attorney Rose did retire, and you know, I can remember meeting with him and a couple of times, and I'll tell you, I mean, in addition, he had a great sense of humor that I think brought a lot to the board too, to the members, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. He could have been a stand-up comic rather than a board member.
Probably could have. Now, I'm going to make a disclosure, and it won't make any difference about my support for you. 2 of my 4 children are graduates of BC, and 2 grandchildren. So, I mean, Holy Cross was, you know, the opponent. So I just want you to know that. I won't hold it against you.
We're friendly.
You know, I was interested how, Tom Hammond was, and he's disappointed he's not here today. I'm so sorry that you both aren't here, because I know you both wanted to be. But I just wanted to ask you about, how the cases have decreased. Isn't that amazing? That you have been instrumental in getting through. Now, you've had a lot of cases in 36 years. One comes to mind that, I'm sorry, there's only Councillor Duff that's up there, so I don't know if you lost people. But anyway, I just wanted to just go back on, I don't know all your cases. I couldn't know for 36 years, but I do know one. And I'm thinking it might be the one that you would talk about. There was a significant case that Frank Sharafa had, a former member. And he was, it was about wires and it was about poles. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, right away.
Basically, I'm sorry. The poles and wires over public ways are sort of a unique.
Just interrupt you for a minute. You were, this case was in the Globe, the Herald. It was really nationwide. It was big. And I don't know if anyone here remembers that, but also it was Frank Sharafa that proposed this, and he was the one that took the fight and you went to court. So you can pick it up from there.
Okay. I helped to write the decision. I didn't go into court, but basically it had to do with whether poles and wires over public ways were subject to local property tax. It was a fairly hot issue because, as you know, there's lots of poles and wires over public ways, and they have a value. They are.
Hello?
Yes, so they are subject to tax, and what the board's decision on that case was that they were subject to tax. So it's very technical stuff, but subsequent to that decision, I'll point out the legislature made it clear that poles and wires over public ways were subject to tax. So they basically affirmed what the board had done and made it legislative rather than judicial.
May not know. That was, I don't know who's talking over there. There's someone coming in. But anyway, that case, Frank Sharafa, he brought that to the court and said that the telephone company should be paying taxes on all the poles and wires throughout the Commonwealth. I can't even imagine how much money the Commonwealth has got since Frank got that. So it was quite controversial, and you won. And thanks to you and Frank, I think that was wonderful. Now, for people who don't know, Frank was a member for 30 years. There's 6-year appointments. And he was appointed by 5 governors, from Weldon to Caucus to Patrick, who voted for him 2 6-year terms that expired in this term, February 8th. But it was interesting, very sad, he was replaced, but he was still working in the office February, the letter we got from the governor was February 7th. And Frank's term was over February 8th. He was still working in the Appellate Tax Office when he was replaced, and his replacement was scheduled for a hearing. Not only did Frank serve 30 years, he was a mentor, and he also was a counsel for the Revenue Department before that, 50 years. And he was 75 years old. His replacement, a woman, 78, only went before the Appellate Tax Board once in 1991. What a loss for all of us. And I'm hoping that I can get the council to send a letter to thank Frank for his 50 years of service. And he never got a letter, he never got a call when he was replaced, and I think we owe that to him. So having said that, now there's nothing that you have to learn, you know what I mean? You know all the members. And the one thing I love about the Appellate Tax Board, and I have voted for all of them except that one, and because Frank should have been replaced, but the point is that I see such respect for everyone on that board. And, you know, there's something to be said about age, about experience, and that's what we got on the Appellate Tax Board. And, you know, and I really value your opinion, because I have the same thing. You don't want to, someone's doing an outstanding job, you don't want to oppose that person. But we have had retirements, but I'm glad you finally did it after 36 years. So, and now, can you tell me, because I have advised residents to go before the Appellate Tax Board who are challenging their local, you know, taxes in their municipality. Can I don't know whether you can answer it, approximately how many residents in Massachusetts have got some relief going before the Appellate Tax Board?
It's hard to say, Counselor. We get anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 new appeals every year. Of that number, about 90% are local property assessment appeals. The other 10% are Department of Revenue appeals. So roughly 90% of the 3,000 to 5,000 would be property. Now, some of those are going to be commercial cases and utility cases and so forth. So it's hard to say, but you know, a fair number are residential taxpayers, and we give them a fair hearing, and you know, some convince us that they're overvalued, and sometimes defend the number, and we have to say to the taxpayer, you're fairly assessed. So that's the best I can do with that question.
You know, the Appellate Tax Board is not, you know, the most visible to people out there, and, you know, they all work very hard. What would you say about the Appellate Tax Board that you have found that has improved in the 36 years that you've been there, that really affects the citizens of Massachusetts?
Well, I think that...
Oh, you know what? Okay, you know, I'm interrupting. I wanted to ask you also with that second part. Could you explain to the public when a case comes up before Appellate Tax Board member and they rule, and then it's appealed, tell us what your role is in that, okay?
Sure, that's a great question. Well, so what happens is a taxpayer who feels they've been on the property side overvalued, or on the state tax side that the commissioner has assessed them wrongly, will file an appeal with us. It goes through our process. We have pretrial status conferences, but they eventually will either settle the case, and like most civil courts, most cases settle, the parties come to an agreement. But if they do go forward to a hearing, they put in their evidence, and the assessors or the commissioner puts in their evidence. It's just a trial like any other court. And then the one board member who hears it makes a recommendation to the other 4 members, and the board votes on it. So my role in that as chief is to provide support to the hearing officer if they have any questions on pretrial matters or evidentiary matters when it's at a hearing. But after the decision, and often I will be asked by the hearing officer as well as the board members what my opinion is on the legal issues that have been raised. And then the board renders a decision. If either party wants to have a full explanation of the factual and legal basis for our decision, they can request what's called a findings of fact and report, which is pretty much like a legal opinion that a court would render. And either myself or a member of my staff in the legal department will draft such a finding. I will review it. If I didn't draft it, approve it, then the members all review it and it gets sent out. And that is the basis of the board's decision. Either party can appeal that, and that written opinion forms the basis of the appeal. The appeals court or the SJC can then see what the basis of our decision was.
Cases, of course, and they have gone to the appeals court. So could you tell the public how that works, that you go before the appeals court, and how does it rise to the importance to go to the SJC?
Well, our decisions automatically, well, don't automatically. When a party appeals our decision, then it would ordinarily go to the appeals court. Either party can request what's called direct appellate review by the Supreme Judicial Court. So if it's a case of significant interest or a significant issue, the parties can request that the SJC take direct appellate review, and it's up to the Supreme Judicial Court whether they think it's an issue of significant importance. I can tell you, just in the last few months, we've had affirmances from the SJC on cases that they thought were significant enough to take direct appellate review. One was an estate tax case, and one was a case that Chairman Hammond was describing that involved the sales tax of the internet industry. In fact, the software that we're using, I believe we're using WebEx, is a product of Cisco, and Cisco was the taxpayer in that case. And it was a very intricate technical decision, and we were affirmed, and we were also affirmed in the estate tax case. And those are just two examples of cases that the SJC has taken direct appellate review on.
You know, this is a very unique time. We're going through a sad time, really, this pandemic. Tell me, how is the Appellate Tax Board working through this? I know courts have been closed only for emergency situations. Now, are you still working on cases? How are people coming before you? And are you as busy? And how is it changing?
Well, there's a couple of sides to it. On one side, it's given us an opportunity. I mentioned those findings of fact and report, which are the board's analysis of the facts and the law that support our decisions. We have gotten the inventory of those cases down to 12, which is the lowest number in my 36 years of experience at the board. Fortunately, the legal department is able quite effectively to work remotely from their homes to write these findings of fact and report. The board members also have been meeting regularly and deciding cases. So we've gotten kind of all of the old work out. Going forward is going to be the challenge, is how to hear new cases. I've been part of several status conferences and motion sessions that we've done remotely to keep cases on track. The great experiment begins in a week or two. We're going to have our first 2 remote hearings. They're relatively small hearings, but we want to test out how this kind of technology can work in for a hearing. So we've also got some pretty big cases scheduled for September. We don't know, frankly, how we're gonna do that, whether the building will be ready for the public or not. But under Chairman Hammond's leadership, we've really instituted a process where parties have to really focus on getting their cases ready for hearing in terms of swapping exhibits beforehand, in terms of coming to agreed statements of fact, putting pre-file testimony in so that experts aren't sitting in a courtroom, rather they're preparing a report to give to the other side. All of these mechanisms, which I think are terrific going forward, even when we're in the building, he is instituting now to make the kind of the remote world as workable as possible. So that's where we are. It's an evolving process, and but I think we're ready, willing, and able to move forward.
So are there many cases that are backed up because of this pandemic?
Not really.
Not really.
All of the about new cases, so new appeals that are coming in the door. Our clerks are still processing the new matters that are coming in. There's really no cases that are languishing for a hearing. It's more the new cases that are coming in that ordinarily we'd be scheduling for hearing. We're trying to work out a way to make them as to hear them as efficiently as possible in this pandemic environment.
For my support for your appointment, and I'm just delighted that someone didn't come from outside, because you do deserve it. You earned it the old-fashioned way. You're qualified, you're experienced, and you've been working with all of that board. And I know when we spoke last week, you spoke so highly of each of them, that, you know, you work years with these people, and that you work so well that, you know that expression, hit the ground running, but that's what it is. So I'm very happy that you applied, and I know that you'll be doing great things as you have in the past with our great Appellate Tax Board. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to ask you, Councillor Duff, I mentioned all the councillors except Councillor Kennedy. Is he there to ask questions? I'm sorry if I was.
I'm sorry, I'm running the hearing, so you finished the questions, I can continue.
Pardon me?
Are you finished with your questions?
No, I just asked you a question. I says, I didn't want to be rude to him, and I mentioned the people who are on remote, and I didn't mention Councillor Kennedy. Will he be there to ask questions? That's all. I don't want to be rude.
All right, are you finished?
Madam Chair, may I say something?
Yes, Councilor Julianville?
Yeah, the councilor from Watertown said that she was the only one on listening on this thing back a ways. And that's not true. So I want to make it plain, since the public is listening to this, all of the councilors are listening. I've had some problems with getting my screen back up, but I listened to everything that was said, as I'm sure the other councilors have too. So that was incorrect, that we had not taken part in this.
Thank you, Councilor Julianville. Councilor Kennedy had an emergency situation come up, and he texted me. He's in full support of the candidate, and we greatly appreciate your service to this part, Attorney DeFrancisco. Also, before I adjourn the hearing, I want to be clear that there is a global pandemic. Many of us are either at high risk or live or take care of people at high risk. The state legislature is meeting with the technology we possess right now, and we're pleased that we have it. And so nobody was told they could not appear. Everybody chose to take advantage of the technology we have for safe and best practices. And I applaud you for doing it. It is absolutely no reason to people to put themselves at risk, whether they're 18 feet away or not right now. So thank you all for participating as you felt safe to do. And with that, I adjourn this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairwoman.